Thank you to all of our speakers. I am glad now that we are able to pull some of them back together. Unfortunately, Phil had to disappear to other meetings within Bays, but I'm very, very pleased to welcome back Dick Elsy from the HVM Catapult, Stewart Miller from Innovate UK, Richard Jones from the University of Manchester, and Tim Minshall, the head of the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge. So welcome back, gentlemen. Really fascinating presentations, and they have prompted a good number of questions. So what I'd like to do, please, is start off with a question for all of you. And Dick, I will come to you first, if I may. One of the questions that was put was around how we improve engagement between universities and industry, and whether there were things that you would like to see happen or that you think could help improve that engagement. So Dick, over to you first, if we can.
Well, Rosa, this has been, as I alluded in my pitch, this is a key topic of conversation at the moment, particularly within UKRI, because the UKRI mission, particularly with the new money that's behind UKRI, is to make more science work for economic and societal benefit. And very interesting when you actually look into it, catapults, just reference HVM Catapult, we have 4 key performance indicators, as in sort of target measurements that we use. We have 4 that relate to how well or otherwise we engage with universities. Which is fine, but interestingly, the research councils and the universities don't have any reciprocal arrangements or targets to work with us. So for me, one of the key things to do is, within the UKRI family, is to create a set of symmetrical objectives, so that we've got objectives to receive some of the great science, and the research councils and universities have got some objectives to push great science through. So I think systematically, and I know that Ottoline Laser is very much a systems thinker, is getting that systematic process in place and really embrace the catapults as a key part of this ecosystem that Stewart talked about, and then drive that with some clear objectives. On top of that, final thing would be, having put some objectives in place, it needs a bit of fuel. So I would like to see some modest funding going into, research acceleration. And I know we've talked about this within the Manufacturing Forum many times, but oiling the wheels of that transaction process of the science into the innovation space is really important. But I do think we've now got the ear of UKRI. Ottoline, as a systems thinker, understands it, and it's been much more widely discussed. So I think I sense that next year may be the time when we actually crystallize that into something positive.
Thank you. So Stewart, let's pass that hot potato over to you. More symmetrical KPIs and a bit of funding to pump prime activity. Is that coming out in your strategy?
Yes, it is, but I think it's even more fundamental than that. I think, as someone who was nearly 40 years in the aerospace industry, what I've seen, both the companies I work for and those that I've worked with, when research from universities is relevant to the direction that they need to go in and can be seen to be going to give financial benefit and make the business more successful, then there's collaboration. So the real important part here is for the research that's being done and what the universities are offering into industry to be seen as relevant. And to make that happen, yes, some of the stuff that Dick's mentioned needs to happen. But I think more importantly, what I touched on in terms of future economy pillar and the way in which not just innovate, but certainly we would like to, stir that pot and get things moving around what is it that in 10, 15, 20 years plus that different markets and different industries and different businesses see will be relevant for them. And earlier I used AI as an example. AI is emerging into all our lives and will continue to do so to a greater extent over the next 10 years. But what's that industry in the UK going to look like in 10 years' time, and what's it going to be demanding is available when we get to that point. I'm very much involved in what's going on around digital twinning and looking at how the UK can have a digital twin programme. And the same questions are being asked there in terms of what is it that UK industry needs from digital twinning, what research needs to be carried out to support that, how would that intersect in 5 years plus with what industry requires. So to sum up, basically for me, from my industry experience and sitting in the chair I sit in now, very much about making things relevant, and then the connections will flow.
So if we keep things relevant, Richard, let's come to you. Is that enough? That will then just create an environment in which they will come together quite naturally? I mean, as Pro Vice Chancellor at Sheffield and now over at Manchester, you must have seen where things work and frankly where they don't.
Absolutely. And I divide it up into three. I think you need to talk about incentives. You need to talk about what incentives university managers have. You need to talk about what structures and instruments you've got. And then you need to talk about partnerships. On incentives, universities are really complex, big places that worry about income. They worry about league tables. So getting engagement higher up the agenda of university vice chancellors is important. We have the knowledge exchange framework, which I was involved in setting setting up. And there, I think it's been very important to have a broad set of measures of engagement and to bring those to the attention of university managers. And I believe that university managements are then in some ways they're simple creatures and they respond to incentives, and if you give them a table that they have to appear high in, they'll do the best to do that. So that's part of it. I think the structures and instruments are important. We've got a bunch of actually very successful instruments. So KTPs, everybody says quite rightly, KTPs are really great instruments for quite medium scale interactions between universities. We've got research councils. EPSRC has introduced its prosperity partnerships, which I think have been very helpful for kind of large scale, for big companies, and a bunch of other bits of money that I think are helpful. But I think partnerships are really vital, and I kind of completely agree with Dick. I mean, having been at AMRC, having had AMRC as part of Sheffield University, it was surprising how little actual incentives there were to make that interaction work. And we tried to make it work because it was the right thing to do, the right thing for both sides. I think this comes on to this question of push and pull that Dick talks about, and Stewart's talk about relevance is important. The measure, I think, what's really important to understand is that you shouldn't think of universities as a bunch of people who do things and then that gets thrown over the wall into the outside world. If engagement with industry is working, you will see that it's working because the directions of research will be different, and people will be, what people will be doing, even for quite basic fundamental research, will look different. And I think that's, where you've seen really good interaction between business and industry, you've seen business shaping the direction, even a quite fundamental upstream research in the directions that they think are appropriate. I think there is a danger, though. I mean, Stewart talks about the industries of the future. I think the danger is you always have to, you imagine sitting around the table with the industry and academics working out what the priority should be. There always ought to be a kind of empty chair or two about those industries that have not yet even been started, the industries of the future that nobody's even thought of. And it's important just to keep that in the mix too.
You're on mute, Rosa. I'll present.
I know, and I was pushing buttons and they weren't working. Dick, thank you. The space bar demute was not working for me. Tim, let's come to you, if we may. I mean, obviously, the Institute provides a mechanism for engagement between industry and Cambridge University. Any reflections from you on how we can boost the engagement between universities and industry more generally?
So yeah, I think there's 3 quick points. Maybe just one little analogy first. That so I've been invited to get involved in a regional development project that's linked to innovation and all sorts of stuff. And I've looked at how many people are involved in it, how much complexity there is, and there's this horrible energy threshold problem. You just go, well, I'd like to do that, but I'm not entirely sure what I need to do. So there's this sort of, how do we overcome these barriers? And I think one of the issues is the ecosystem, and it's great to see that language being used more and more. It's great to see so many people, particularly in UKRI, using this term and drawing up ecosystem maps. But they are so important because they explain how you engage, who does what. And that then leads to the second slight concern, which is, I did hear some language at another talk elsewhere where there was sort of a talk about innovation and manufacturing, as if they were separate things. And you go, no, this sort of drives this idea. There are two communities that must be brought together, rather than as an ecosystem trying to create sustainable competitive advantage. And if we don't have that, we're going to constantly be thinking there are barriers to be overcome. I don't think there are that many barriers. But I think this, two last little points. One is just talking about universities and industry kind of misses the other bit, which is the critical role of technical education, of the further education colleges. And it's those together which are going to do something useful. So again, if we just have a sort of a dipole view of it and just go, it's this and this, how do we work better together? It's always going to be slightly difficult and not really deliver on the true value. And then the final bit is, I think I wouldn't disagree with anybody, perhaps just giving a slightly different perspective. Targets do, of course, drive behavior, but it would be much, I think, even more effective to make the benefits clear, make it easy and obvious why you want to work with someone, rather than saying you have to work with them so we can tick this box. So I think maybe just to make sure the language is more about a positive language of you want to do this because it'll help you do what you do anyway and do it better, rather than you must or else.
I think that's really helpful. So getting that balance right within the language is crucial. It's interesting when we talk about universities and industry, because industry, of course, is a very, very varied bag of things with different people struggling with different challenges. And quite often we talk about industry when we should be talking about different segments of industries. Particular challenge, of course, is around the smaller businesses. You know, helping a smaller business to navigate what is a pretty complex ecosystem, it strikes me as a key challenge. Are there things that we could do to make it easier to engage those smaller businesses? And let's stick with you, Tim.
I think there are. It's a bit of a hardy perennial, because there is that risk that, you know, what was that famous quote to the bank robber? Why do you keep robbing the banks? Because that's where the money is. You know, why do universities work with larger companies? Because they can afford to provide the resources to enable collaboration. Very natural. Why would you not do that? SMEs, as some of the points raised in the Q&A and the chat, you know, it is a significant part of the UK manufacturing economy. So just saying, well, it's too difficult is unacceptable. We have to do this better. But it often does require funding to support it. It won't happen on its own. The universities can't afford it to do it themselves. The companies can't afford to do it. So something needs to be done to stimulate that. And I know there've been lots of great programs over the years that have provided the funding to enable the collaboration between the smaller firms and universities, but they typically have a fixed life. And all that effort goes into building up these collaboration mechanisms, and then sometimes they just fall away and then a new thing comes along. So I think there's something not just about providing that support, but providing it in a simple and consistent way. So it's not that people, particularly smaller firms with, you know, constrained amount of time and effort to put into this, can do it easily and swiftly, rather than thinking, I've now got to work out this new scheme in this complex ecosystem. I haven't got time for that. I've got customers waiting. So I think there's a bit of an issue there.
I remember when I was managing director of the Government Small Business Service, I think we identified about 300 different forms of business support. You know, too many for anybody to engage with seriously. Dick, I mean, the Catapult has often been conceived of as being an organisation which is really there for bigger businesses. I know that that's not true, with about half of our projects being with small businesses. Any reflections from you on how we can really engage them and help them to tap into the support that's available?
Well, we have a lot to thank big business for, because if it wasn't for big business, we would have never got out the starting blocks in the first place. So, you know, let's not dismiss the importance of that. But over the years that we've been in operation, and it's, you know, it's coming up 10 years next year, we have very actively gone out to reach out to the SME community and through active approach, and that means using the core money we get from Innovate UK. We've deliberately funded extra bandwidth to get to SMEs. And the only reason we've done that is, you know, most of the catapults are run by people who've got industrial experience. We know how important it is to the fabric of the UK. So it's been a key part of our mission to do that. And 50% of our client base is now SMEs, which is great, but it only represents 10% of the income, which actually shows that there's kind of disproportionate effort that we're having to put in with SMEs. I think we're making a really good fist of it on the local agenda. So I think local connections with SMEs, which each of the 7 centres of the Catapult and the extra satellites we've got works really well. But even we haven't got a decent kind of national picture yet, and that's something that the Catapult is working on. And I think that's the thing that's missing, is really clear direction at a national level of support infrastructure for SMEs. And Tim's absolutely right. You could cover a board table with post-it notes of all the well-intentioned activities that are going on in the SME community, but we need things of scale. And we are sadly missing, having a manufacturing advisory service. And in the end, we hoovered up a lot of the resources of mass into our Catapult to help with SMEs, up with the extra bandwidth that we bought. So in a perverse kind of way, we've been a bit of a proxy for it. But that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't consider some serious, clearly signposted national programme activity. And I think that's what's missing in the UK, and we'd be delighted to get behind it.
Thanks, Dick. Stewart, over to you, if I may. Are you looking to segment businesses within your strategy? What's the Innovate UK view of how we can really embrace the smaller business community?
Well, I think this is one area where Innovate UK has got a key role to play. I think on the plus side, at the moment, there's lots of mechanisms for reaching out to businesses, big, small, and in between. But there's a lot of emphasis on trying to support small businesses, and that goes all the way from using things like the knowledge transfer, the KTN, the knowledge transfer network, the KTPs, the various grants, the challenges, etc., that we set up, the use that we make of the various catapults, the regional people that we have trying to connect on a regional and a devolved administration basis. So there's quite an extensive network to connect. However, when you do connect, it's quite difficult to navigate. And it's one of the things that we've even highlighted in the vision statement that you saw earlier, around trying to improve the ability for businesses, big and small, but particularly for SMEs, to navigate. Sometimes the admin's a burden, the timescales are too long, the amounts of money and support that are being offered are not quite right. And it's very fragmented. If you imagine the journey of a business, someone got up in the morning, came up with a bright idea and decided to start a new business, and how they go through that to become, the far end of the range, a unicorn, and everything in between. We don't have a seamless process for that. We have a lot of targeted, individual, siloed things that help at various stages, but it's not joined up. So one of the things that the strategy you'll see emerging in the early part of next year we'll talk about is how Innovate joins those things up better, such that we, one, tailor the support relative to the stage of maturity that a particular business is at, relative to the market that it's in, relative to the type of product that it's bringing to that market, be it a physical product or a service or something based around, for example, cybersecurity or whatever, and bringing all of those into the mix. So again, just referring back to the slide that I put up, inside that little incubator bubble, when we bring things into that seed tray, the idea is that the mix of nutrients in that seed tray is tailored to that particular seed. And our hope is that by doing that, the support to SMEs, one, will be better in terms of easier to engage with, but also longer lasting and more tailored to their needs.
Stewart, thank you. I'd like to pick up on that theme of joining up, if I may, and throw over to you, Richard, if we can. I mean, one of the key challenges is making sure that the national speaks to the regional and the local, making sure that we have got that join up at the geographic level. Any reflections from you on how well that's happening at the moment? And then I'll come back to you, Stewart, and to Dick about how well Innovate and the HVM Catapult feel that they are plugged into those regional discussions.
Well, I think it's clear. Well, I think I can see what we ought to do. I don't think we've got very far along that. And I think the problem that SMEs have with universities is that universities are very big and confusing organisations themselves. It's very hard to navigate through them. And they tend to be quite inflexible about what they offer. Yeah, okay, we can do you a 2-year postdoc. Here's the bill or whatever. So understanding that SMEs may have very different needs, not just about pure R&D, it's maybe as much about skills, maybe about demonstration and diffusion. So I think universities need to be much more flexible about doing that. I think that can happen in a regional context much better. So what I would like to see would be, in a place like Manchester, I'd like to see all the universities being able to, present a united front to say, well, for that you want to go to that place, for this you want to go somewhere else. Working also with catapults and indeed FE colleges, as Tim mentioned. So I think, what I'd like to see is a kind of really excellent regional innovation support package would be all the universities, with their different missions, and catapults, and other RTOs, and indeed FE colleges, all being able to say, we can all collectively support the SME base that's important. Manchester, Sheffield, both are very similar, and their economies are very SME driven, and reaching that's going to be crucial for this business of getting that competitive advantage that Tim talks about.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed, Stewart. I think that there is a concept there for you within your strategy. Any reflections on that engagement between Innovate UK and the regional tier?
Yeah, I think we're very conscious of the whole place levelling up agenda, and trying to make sure that we think through how to do that properly. There's no doubt that the catapults have a big role in that, and I meet regularly with the CEOs from the catapults, and I think we're all on the same page when we see the catapults as being important and expanding their reach beyond their geographical location. I think, however, there's a challenge just generally, which is, for example, if I take a bad example, if we were to just suddenly say we want a hydrogen catapult, and we'll open it in Bolton, that would be a good idea. Let's just do that. And because that means there's more stuff in the north of England. That doesn't mean that catapult is going to be successful. There's a lot of other things in the mix to do with access to the overall supply chain, the involvement with universities, the supply of the right skilled people with the right qualifications, supply of the right kind of labour as you scale up. All of that's important. So all of that needs to go into the mix. So I don't think there's a simple answer that says, we can address some of the things that Richard mentioned by simply plonking things in various parts of the country and hoping they'll just survive. I think it needs to be well reasoned and well thought out, and there will be some really difficult decisions to be made about how do you attract the talent to a particular area, how do you grow the supply chain. And I think there are some good examples of that at the moment. If you look at what's been done around space in terms of clustering things together. And one of my hobbies is classic cars, and I know there's a thing started at Vista where a lot of classic car companies have decided to cluster together. So I think there's some advantages in that kind of approach, but in general, this is an area again that in the strategy we've been very occupied with in terms of how do we spread the goodness out, while at the same time not leveling down, because we don't want to be doing that either. So again, unfortunately, in this innovation space, none of the answers are easy and none of the problems are straightforward. So this is going to be quite a balancing act over the next few years to get this right. But it is essential. We need to spread it around a bit more.
Against, of course, a very difficult spending backdrop as well for government. So, Dick, how is the catapult tapping in or in joining up with the regional agenda?
Well, I think we're quite strong with our very local agendas within each of the centres, as I previously said. I think the big challenge is because we're seeing, as we've discussed this morning, huge technological shifts coming up. The industry that brought me up, for instance, the car industry, is this unbelievable pace and move towards electrification, and there's a real danger that SMEs in the supply chain get left behind in that. And conversely, there's a huge opportunity if we can engage and encourage people to shift across to repurpose themselves for new technologies. But that's a huge undertaking for an SME, and that's why I believe that we still need rather than fueling more random noise, you know, the post-it notes on the table, is just pour more money into that. I do think we need some coordinated national programs delivered locally to help support SMEs to drive the change. And I think what we should look back on is the various initiatives over the years that have been really successful. Let's Pareto them from a perspective of what's worked well for SMEs, and then say let's create some programs in that shape that we know work, and get on and do them. Nationally funded, locally delivered.
And a strategic approach running right the way through it.
Correct. Yeah.
Good answer. Thank you very much indeed. Now, gentlemen, before I let you go, I've got one more question. We know that next year is going to be a comprehensive spending review year. So I'm going to allow you to imagine, given the time of year, that Santa is loading up his sleigh with goodies that will be in the comprehensive spending review. What would be the one thing that each of you would like Santa to deliver onto your desk, please? And Richard, I'm going to start with you, please.
Well, I would like an R&D and play strategy. Actually, I know I'm going to get an R&D play strategy in the new year, but I'd like an R&D play strategy that I think did two things. One, that it really emphasised translational research and this, the innovation end of the spectrum, and it really emphasized co-creation. It really emphasized what Dick talked about. I want local places to get much more involved with thinking about why their innovation system isn't quite good enough, what they could do, and I want national organizations to be able to work with local places and come up with really coherent, regionally appropriate plans that are will get economies moving towards solving big problems, getting towards this economy of 2050. So that's what I want.
Super. I will make sure that it's on the list for Santa. Stewart, you will be, of course, putting in a bid via Bays to the Treasury. What would you like in the sleigh for you?
If it was just one thing,
only one. I'm afraid we can't be greedy with Santa.
So to be specific, one of my other passions, as well as innovation in general, is around digital twinning and what that's going to do for everyone, but particularly for design engineering and for manufacturing. So if I had one thing I'd like the UK to get its act together on digital twinning and really start to push in that direction and really understand the impact that it's going to make, whether we like it or not. So yeah, that would be it.
Thank you very much indeed. It's added to Santa's list. And Tim, finally, for you, what would you like Santa to bring for you?
Well, I was going to say a hammer so that I can modify my laptop so it definitely can't deal with any more Zoom calls. And I can but more seriously, I think if it's really hard, and Santa's going to have to work quite hard on this when all his elves are, the picture or something that allows us, when people come to us with a question going, how do I engage with this? How do I solve that? Who does this? I'd be able to give them the answer. And I think it's great the way we're moving towards these nice system views, system models, system diagrams of what's going on, but an operationalizable version of one of those, or something like that, would be fantastically helpful for so many of us.
So basically a what 3 words or Ways app for people to be able to navigate the system. I think I would probably join you in wanting that from Santa so that everybody could find their way to the door of the high value manufacturing catapult. Tim, gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. I know that there are a number of questions that have been posed in the Q&A function that we've not been able to get to. I think you have all said that you'd be willing to help us answer some of those questions offline in the follow-up communications. But for now, panelists, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you.
You didn't ask me what I wanted for Christmas, Rose.
Oh, Dick, I'm so sorry.
And
forgetting the boss is always the worst. Dick, what would you like?
I'm a fan of modest Christmas gifts with meaning. And what I'd like is a note, perhaps just an email from Dame Otterline Laser to say, I've just had a look at the recent Bays Catapult review, yet another review, and I've realised how important the Catapult programme is to my entire innovation ecosystem. And I want to talk to you in the new year over a cup of coffee about how we can get the HVM Catapult to step up and use all of its muscle and the muscle of the other catapults and all the universities that it knows and loves to tackle some of the really big things that are on the national agenda for the next 5 years.
I think that that's probably allowable. Stewart, can you see if you can make that so? I would add a PS to the bottom of Otterline's note, which is PS, we guarantee no reviews of the catapult system for the next 10 years.
I think that was inferred.
Super. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Dick, my apologies for skipping over you there. Let us move on to our next presentation.